Hey everyone, HardlyBriefDan here. Just a quick note before we get started. This video is comprised of the lectures from the fourth section of my free Udemy course. The first section of the course is just an introduction, and the second section is an assignment to review the ebook that goes over some of the programming basics and the Unreal Engine gameplay framework. You can get the ebook by signing up on my website, HardlyBrief.dev. The previous section, or the third section, was focused on setting up the project and adding a plugin for us to use throughout the course. Remember, the links to both my Udemy course and my website are in the description below. This section will focus on creating our obstacle, which will be a tornado-like effect that will damage and throw the player if they get too close. We want to create an obstacle that is dangerous and should be avoided. Through actions and sound effects, we can really reinforce the danger to the player. Gameplay is really about providing good feedback to the player as they perform their actions. We will first create the tornado blueprint actor and add it to our game world. From there, we'll add more functionality such as the ability to activate and deactivate the tornado, add collision effects, and finally play some sound effects. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, we have now installed our FX Variety Pack. We've created our blueprints folder and we're in our new Unreal Fundamental course project. We're going to double click into the blueprints and we're going to create our very first blueprint. And it will be an actor. So actor is one of the base classes in Unreal Engine, and basically everything you see in the scene is some type of actor. And so our lightning tornado obstacle will be an actor. So I'm going to right click, we're going to click blueprint class actor, and we're going to say BPA underscore tornado. Now you're going to see a lot of prefixes used in Unreal Engine. A lot of the time you'll see BP underscore and then the name. I like putting BPA just to be a little bit more explicit that this is an actor and not a pawn or not a character controller. So I tend to use BPA, but it's really up to you. As long as you're consistent, everything will be fine. So once you create BPA tornado, we're going to double click into it to open it up. It's open on my other monitor into a new window, so I'll drag it and you can dock it into the editor. So here on the left hand side we have a components window. Below that we have my blueprint, which exposes the graphs that are available to us, the functions, the macros, and the variables and events. On the right hand side is a details panel. The details panel updates based on what you click here on the left hand side. And in the middle is the viewport, which is where our object will be. You also have a construction script graph and then an event graph. We'll be doing a lot in the event graph as well as the viewport. If your screen does not look like this, again, it's because you can dock these windows and change your layout. So in this case, I grab my blueprints and I put it here on the bottom left. I move my components to the top left and my details on the right, kind of similar to the setup in the map view. So what we're going to do first is add the particle system, which is our tornado. So I'm going to come to components. I'm going to click add, and we are going to type in particle. There's two options available. Cascade is the old system, Niagara is the new system. We're going to use Cascade system because that's the system that the FX Variety Pack uses. So go ahead and click that. It's going to add a particle system component to our component tree. In the center, you still don't see anything, but our details panel has updated and there should be a section for template. If you click on the drop down, you can type in dark storm. And that is the particle effect that we want. So you see as it loaded in, we have a giant lightning tornado. And I'm going to click compile and save. This is pretty much our object. We'll go back into our third person map and we will drag the tornado into the editor so that we can see it. So I'm going to go down in our content browser. I'm going to click and drag into the world and place it. So our tornado is physically in the world. We can see it. I'm going to right click in the viewport and then use W, A, S, and D keys to kind of fly around to get closer to get a better view. But that is our tornado. And if I press play, our character can run up to it, but nothing happens, right? We're not colliding with it. There's no interactions. And so in the next lecture, we're going to look at how to add collisions to our tornado. Okay, so we've created our tornado. Now we want to add collision to it. And adding collision to objects is pretty simple. We're going to go to our components hierarchy. We're going to click the add button and we are going to type in box collision. There are multiple types of collision. In this case, we're going to use a box, but there's also a sphere collider and a capsule collider. They're just different shapes. Now that I've created the object, it's highlighted blue. We're going to type in tornado collider. You can name it whatever you want. The name does not matter. In our viewport, you should be able to see now we have an object that is a faint orange outline of a box. And this is the collider. So if any actor in our game world runs into that, a bunch of events could trigger. And the goal for us is to use those events to cause the player to launch backwards, to play a sound, to provide feedback to the player as they collide with our tornado. So what we're going to do is come up to the top here, and we're going to click this far right one that's for scaling. You can also hit the R on your keyboard, and I'm going to click and drag up the blue marker so we can scale up our collider. I'm then going to hit W on the keyboard to translate up, and I'm going to click the blue and drag up again. And this is just positioning so that our box is taking up more of the space. We can change our view by coming up and clicking perspective and going to the left. And you can get a better visual of our box. I'm going to click the right side. We'll click the scale again. We'll click the red, and we'll expand on the red axis. I'm going to click our left and go to the front. And again, click the green to expand. And now our box is taking up the bulk of it. I'm going to click W on my keyboard to move it up just a tad. We'll click compile and save. And now we want to respond to our collider. And so if you click the collider and in the details panel, you scroll all the way down, you'll see there's a bunch of events that we can listen to or react to. One of those is called on component begin overlap. I'm going to click the plus button. It's going to add a node to our event graph. So we went from the viewport to the event graph. This is where the blueprints are placed and how we can program a lot of the logic that we're going to be doing in this prototype. So on a begin overlap is called when an object, an actor, collides, it begins to overlap with this box. So if my mouse cursor is a collider, an actor, and it collides and it goes through this box, this event will be called one time just when it begins to overlap. We're going to use this event to print a statement to the screen using print text. So what I did here is I clicked and dragged off this node. I then typed in print and text, and it creates this blueprint node for us. In this text box, I'm going to use Control A to highlight it all, and I'm going to type in player collided. I'm going to click compile and save, go back to our map view and press play. And now when my player runs into this, we're going to see a message at the top left output that says player collided. There you go. It's in blue at the top left, player collided. I'll run through it again, and we see player collided. And we've added collisions, basic collisions to our tornado. In the next few lectures, we're going to add more functionality and really figure out how we can detect whether or not our player has collided versus just an ordinary actor. So we have added collision, and we are detecting when something collides with our tornado. But what we want to do is actually detect when our player collides with the tornado. And the way we do that, I'm in the blueprint that we created in the event graph. The way we do that is by using this other actor node. So I'm going to highlight this connection. I'm going to hold Alt on my keyboard and left click. That's going to delete it. I'm going to move this off to the right. And I'm zooming in a lot more than normal. And the way you can do that is by holding Control and using your mouse wheel to zoom in. But I'm going to click on the other actor node and let it go. And then I'm going to type in cast to third person character. What this is going to do is it's going to try to attempt to take this actor, the thing that's collided with our tornado, and try to convert it to a third person character object. That object is our player character that's running around the world. And if it's successful, then we can do something. If the cast fails, then we can do something else. So it gives us two options. The top node, again, is a successful cast. The bottom node is a unsuccessful cast. The last node, the middle node is unsuccessful cast. The bottom node is the actual third person object. And this object will be null or it won't exist if the cast fails. If it's successful, then we'll have access to call certain functions and do different things with our third person character. So we're going to go off the other actor. We're going to cast to our third person character. If the cast is successful, then we will print to the screen that our player has collided. And let's go ahead and make sure that works. So I'm going to click compile and save. We'll come back to our third person map, press play, and if all goes well, we should see the exact same thing we saw last time where it just says the player has collided. So you can see in the top left, it says player collided. Again, I'll do it again. Player collided top left. It's working as we need. I'm going to hit escape. We'll go back into our blueprint and I want to explain a little bit about casting. So casting has a bad rap. There's a lot of tutorials that say you should completely avoid it. And then as you go on, you see people using them constantly. And so it causes a lot of confusion. Casting is not inherently bad, and it's something that we use in C++ and in blueprints. The issue is if you abuse casting, it can create performance problems later down the road. So when we cast to an object, in this case our third person character, this object that's in the bottom right hand corner of our node is actually loaded into memory in blueprints. So if I had a bunch of casts where I'm casting to 30 different objects, when this tornado loads, every single object that I'm casting to, no matter what, even if I'm not performing the cast at that time, will be loaded into memory and therefore can cause performance problems. In this case, when we cast to our player is loaded in memory currently because we are running around the world, so it doesn't matter. So this cast is not technically free, but it has very minimal performance impact, and this cast is definitely okay in this instance, and we are going to be using this object later on in our lecture when we actually start subtracting player health. Now that we're detecting our player when we collide with a tornado, we actually want to add some feedback. So it's important to add feedback to actions that the player does. That's part of gameplay, right? That creates a gameplay loop. And so what we want to do is use a built-in function in Unreal called launch character. So I'm going to click the pin that says as BP third person, going to drag, and then I'm going to type in launch character. I'm going to hit enter. That's going to add the node to our graph. I'm going to connect the two pins from print text to launch character. And what this node does, it takes a vector, in this case a 3D vector of X, Y, and Z, and it creates a velocity and a direction that will launch our character. So I'm going to pick some high numbers. I'm going to do 1500 for the X, 1600 for the Y, and we will launch our character 1000 units in the Z, which means it's up in the air. I will click compile and save. And now when we press play and we run our character in the tornado, it's going to throw us into a direction. So let's click play and test that out. Here I have my character. I'm going to jump, and you can see it threw me outside the map. I'm going to hit escape and play again, and we can test it out one more time. I'm going to click jump, and it throws me against the wall. And so what this is doing, it's taking our player character, it's applying a force, a velocity to our character and launching us into the air. In the next video, we're going to look at adding some sound effects and then creating some damage so that we can apply or subtract health from our player. I am in our BPA_tornado blueprint file. We've added the node to launch our character into the air, and now we want to play a sound effect. The sound is going to provide even more feedback to our player that this tornado is dangerous, and when we run into it, it launches us in the air, and it's going to play a negative sound effect. So I'm going to left click on this pin of launch character. I'm going to let go and type in play sound 2D. 2D sound is non-spatial, meaning it's in front of you the entire time. When you click on the sound, we're going to select an asset. I'm going to scroll down until it says eject from player_Q. These sounds come with the starter pack that we selected when we created our project. I'm going to click compile and save. We'll go back to our game, and when my player runs into the tornado, it's going to launch us into the air, and then it's going to play that sound effect. So press play. We're going to run into the tornado. It should throw us, and it plays a sound. Let's do it one more time. Perfect. So in the next tutorial, we're going to look at how we can turn off or deactivate our tornado. All right, so I'm in the BPA tornado, and what we're going to do is add an event, a custom event that's going to deactivate our tornado. And deactivation means we're going to hide the particle system and then we're going to turn off collisions. So in my event graph, I'm going to hold control on my keyboard and use the mouse wheel to zoom in a little bit more. I'm going to right click and say custom event, and there's an option here called add custom event. I'm going to click it. We're going to label this deactivate. This will deactivate our tornado. And what we want to do is use two nodes that are built into Unreal. The first one is called set actor hidden in game. This will just hide our actor. And so we need to set the new hidden Boolean to true. So I checked the checkbox. I'm going to go off the pin here and we're going to say set actor collision, set actor enable collision. This is also a node built into Unreal Engine that allows us to disable collision. So in this case, I'm going to use I'm going to leave the checkbox unchecked. That means that the collision will be disabled. I will come up to the top of our event graph, and if I zoom in again, you can see we have a node called event begin play, and this says this node is disabled and will not be called. Drag off the pins to build functionality. This is just a built-in comment. These three nodes are built into every event graph when you build a new blueprint actor. In this case, we want to use event begin play. Event begin play launches when we press play in our game. So back in our level, if I hit the play button, the event begin play event will go off for this tornado actor and we can execute some sort of code. So in this case, we're going to use a delay node. So I dragged off the pin. I'm going to type in delay and hit enter on my keyboard. This is a delay node. This will allow us to create a timer in the background for a certain amount of time. That's the duration. And then once this timer completes, we can run a function. So I'm going to set this to 2 seconds. After 2 seconds, we're going to deactivate our tornado. And this is the way we're going to test to make sure that our deactivation is actually working. So I will click compile and save like we normally do. We'll go back to our map. I'll press play. And as you see, in 2 seconds, our tornado disappeared and I can run through it. And it acts like it's totally gone, which is the intended purpose. So in the next lecture, we're going to look at how we can actually reactivate our tornado, and then we'll add some sound effects. In the previous lecture, we created a function or event called deactivate. What deactivate did was it hid our particle system in the game or hid our actor, and then after that we disabled collisions. So now we want to activate, which means basically do the opposite of what we did for deactivate. So in the event graph of our BPA_tornado, I'm going to right click and I'm going to click add custom event. I will label this or call it activate. I'm going to move it into place, and what we can do is click and drag to highlight both of the nodes. I'm going to hold Control and hit C on my keyboard to copy, and then Control V as I click down here, Control V to paste. You can move the nodes into place, connect the pins, and now we just want to do the opposite of deactivate. So we're going to unclick the new hidden, right? So it's unchecked. So we're going to show our object in game, and then we want to enable collision. Therefore, we're going to make this value true. So now our activate function will show our actor and then enable collision. And the way we're going to test that is if we go back up to event begin play, I'm going to click and drag to highlight the delay node, hit Control C to copy, click to the right of deactivate, click, and then Control V to paste, connect the pins, and then off completed, we're going to say activate. I'll hit compile and save. We'll jump back into our game and press play to test. What we should see is after 2 seconds, the tornado deactivates, which we won't be able to see. And then 2 seconds later, it should reactivate itself. Let's test it out. So it's gone. 2 seconds later, it came back. And now collisions are working as intended. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to add sound effects to our actual tornado. Just some ambient sound effects as the final touch for this part of the course. And then we're going to jump into how we can actually add player health and apply damage to our character. So the last thing that we want to add to our BPA tornado is some ambient sound effects, some sparkles or some fire sound, something that says, hey, this thing is kind of dangerous, provide some feedback to the player. And the way we're going to do that is using our activate and deactivate functions that we just created in the last 2 lectures. So in our activate method, or excuse me, event, I'm going to come down to set actor enabled collision. Off the pin, I'm going to drag and I'm going to say spawn sound 2D. This will create a audio component for us and we can play a sound effect. So I'm going to click the drop down box. I'm going to type in fire and it's called fire sparks 01 underscore Q. We're going to select that one. And the last thing we're going to do is off our return value pin, we're going to click and drag, and then we're going to select promote to variable. I'm going to click that. And in our variables panel here at the bottom left, it has a new variable for an audio component, and we're going to label this sound effect. So what our activate function is doing now is we're going to show our particle system in the game. We're going to enable collision so that our player can run into the particle system or the tornado. And then we're going to spawn a sound. The sound is going to be a sparky fire sound, and it's going to continue to loop. Now we need to be able to turn this off. So what we're going to do in our deactivate function is after we hide our actor and we turn off collision, we're going to turn off the sound. And there's a couple ways you can do this. I'll show you one in this video. But if you come down to our variables and you click sound effect and you drag it up, you can select what you'd like to do. So in this case, I'm going to click get. This is going to get us our audio component. And if we click the pin and drag off of it, we can say stop, which this will stop the sound, which is the intended behavior. But before we do that, we actually want to do something a little different. We want to convert this to what is called a validated get. So I'm going to come up to this node sound effect. I'll right click. And at the bottom, it says convert to validated get. And this says adds in branching execution pins so that you can separately handle when the return value is valid or invalid. So I'm going to click that. The node is going to change. I'm going to adjust so we can fit everything in. Connect the pin from set actor enable collision to our validated get. And then we want to say if we're able to get this audio component, then we want to say stop. And the reason why we want to do this is that there's a potential that we don't actually spawn this sound effect and set the variable. So instead of crashing the game, we would just want to ensure that this audio component called sound effect that's stored in this variable is actually present or there, and then we'll go ahead and stop the sound. So in order to test this, I'm going to compile and save, but we want to change two more things before we actually do test it. In the spawn sound component node, there's an arrow here. You can click it and it opens some more options. I'm going to adjust the volume to about 0.2. I'm doing this because when we have a lot of sound effects, a lot of these tornadoes, the sound will get louder and louder, and I don't want to blow my speakers. So we've adjusted the volume here. We now want to go back to our event begin play, and instead of doing this whole delay, deactivate, delay, activate, we're actually going to cut all that out. So I clicked drag to highlight. I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard and move the activate to the left and then connect the two pins up. So now when we press play, we're going to activate our tornado, which means we're going to show it in game. We are going to add collision, make sure it's enabled, and we're going to spawn a sound. So now when we run around in our game world, we should be able to hear the tornado. We should be able to jump into the tornado where it then launches us back. And then we will eventually get to adding or applying damage. So let's go test it out. Go back into our third person map. I'm going to hit play. You should be able to hear faintly a sound effect. And if I jump into it, it's going to still throw us. We'll test it out one more time. You should be able to hear the sound. And it's still throwing us as it should. Perfect. So now we're going to move on to our next section where we're going to look at how we can apply damage to our player. I'll see you all in the next lecture.